Can you walk Toronto's Yonge Street? People do it all the time in small sections, of course, but could you walk the entire distance? I mean, yes, you could, but there's literally no reason to ever do that. Toronto has a Line 1 subway that covers the distance north to south along Yonge Street, so why would anyone walk that 16.5-kilometer distance? Well, today I embark on that journey, not only to prove a point that it's possible, but when the subway breaks down, Toronto really is a walkable city. The start of the adventure from north is Finch Station. This area is mostly the restaurants and stores along Yonge, but it seems like the high-rise owners are looking to expand over the sites of local businesses, much like they always do across the city. Next on our list is North York Centres, where Empress Walk Theatre resides and lots of shops in the community library and theatre about. The North York Centre is where a lot of the activity happens in North York, as you can imagine, but to an even more busier intersection, we move on towards Shepherd Yonge. As one of the busiest intersections of the city, it connects the north to the highways in and out of Toronto. With towering skyscrapers, this is quite the sight to behold. This serves as the hub for North York's urban development projects all across. Speaking of the highway, to cross by foot through this section you have to traverse under and around these concrete paths below. And considering the weather, the snow, the winds, this was quite the tumultuous journey, I'd have to say. You can see in this shot here, the snow is at least almost a foot high. Now, at this point you might be wondering, even if someone was crazy enough to take this journey, why would you do so in the middle of winter with a bunch of snow? Well, truth be told, I thought it'd be funny. And besides, passing through the snowscapes, it was beautiful to see the frost-covered trees. These snowscapes actually were pretty beautiful to see, and we wouldn't have seen it normally in the summertime. Granted, the naturescapes around this highway are surprisingly well put together, all things considered. Finally arriving on the other end of the bridge, it was clear now that had we been on the other side of the road, there was a clear sidewalk path to cross, so we could have just avoided this whole debacle. Whoops. But listen, it's more about the journey than the destination, and moving from that blunder, I arrived at York Mills Station. But first, there was a random Cybertruck parked halfway on the road. Don't know what's going on here, but not great. The nature scenes along Yonge are also a wonderful component, like this river along the valley. Residential areas and a full uphill trek to the shops along Yonge for the communities here. There are these just long stretches of walking in between these stations, unfortunately, but at the very top of the hill, we finally make it to York Mills proper. Atop the hill, the area is starting to appear more dense again, but unlike North York, it's more like a homey kind of way. The community stores along a nice neighborhood rather than the confines of skyscrapers. Though I fear, much like its north sparser areas, companies will bulldoze them down for high-rises eventually, so let's just enjoy what we have for now. If you like travel videos like this, I'd urge you to like and subscribe. I'm trying to grow this channel a lot in 2025, so any support is greatly appreciated. There's more travel content ahead, but for now, back to the video. Arriving at Lawrence Station, it featured Lawrence Park, where families took their kids sledding through the perfect snowy conditions. Conditions not really meant for walking in reality, but alas, this peaceful atmosphere couldn't last forever. Moving further south, the construction cranes and high-rises came into view. With larger scale buildings, larger scale stores, larger scale restaurants and everything, we made our way close. Do you mind? I'm trying to narrate. Speaking of high-rises, the skyscrapers start to sprout up in what we call Midtown today, but was Uptown before the northern expansions. Yonge and Eglinton's another major intersection, serving as a dividing line between the north and the south. With large shopping centers and offices, this big city density is starting to form. The journey between stops began to shorten, as closer downtown the density of stops also began to increase. The wind began to pick up as snow continued to pour down, and truth be told, it was a bit difficult with all the slush and whatnot, but we pressed on anyway, moving through the city and making closer to the halfway point. Past Davisville Station, there weren't as many towering buildings as pockets of these older Toronto places congregated around in a much less modernized area compared to the busier hubs. Still, there's a fair share of urban projects completed and still in the works along Yonge due to the high demand to build in this area. St. Clair Station is the first stop along the trek where you can see the heart of downtown in a much clearer view. No longer a far-off concept, but part of the city we've all been walking in. At this point, the reality started to sink in that I'd walked all the way out of the heart into this area now. What is normally a 20-minute subway ride was a much longer walk. The next station was Summer Hill, featuring the Mastermind toys that Marcus and I visited during our game of hide-and-seek across Toronto. Marcus, we perceived some pretty devastating news.
We got the 8-ball curse, and unfortunately we don't have the tennis balls.
Toy store did not have toy balls for some reason, none that were small, and so we gotta go to the convenience store nearby.
Alright.
Though there are still old remnants of Toronto's past in its architecture, it's clear that Toronto's moving into a rapidly urbanized metropolis, as once we pass Rosedale Station, that ambition starts to show its true colors. Bloor and Yonge is what many consider to be the border of the city's downtown, and the density and foot traffic can be overwhelming to many not accustomed to it. I remember the first couple of times I've been here, and it's definitely a lot to take in. As the intersection between Yonge and Bloor Street, as the name implies, it serves as a pretty good center point for any sort of transit-oriented game that one might play.
We're here at Bloor and Yonge Station. We're playing hide and seek across Toronto.
We're back at Bloor and Yonge Station. We're playing tag across Toronto. The next stops are Wellesley and College, and they're very close together and easy to miss even when riding the subway. Nearing the end of the journey, we find the streets lined with restaurants from fast food chains to divine cultural offerings. There's a little bit of everything in our multicultural hubs of Toronto. But our very own Sankofa Square takes the cake when it comes to being busy. This multi-directional crossing reminiscent of Times Square echoes the street noise and grandiose screens, hosting our very own Eden Center shopping mall. Dundas Station rides on the north side, while on the south side Queen Station resides. There's always something to do in Sankofa Square. Queen Station sits at the south end, like I said, and continues onward towards King Station. As we get further south, we can see Meridian Hall for the Performing Arts of Orchestra, and theater for Toronto's cultural offerings. These towering buildings above give Toronto its iconic skyline, seen in every depiction along the waterfront. Part of that iconic skyline, of course, is the CN Tower as seen from Union Station, our largest train station connecting the city across the country. But even past Union at the end of the subway line going south, we still have to walk to the end of Yonge Street. Here's the Rubik's Cube building I've seen all too often when exploring this part, and truth be told, I still don't know why it's like that. But now, it's time to cross the street towards the harborfront proper, and while its cerulean blue waves are mostly covered by the snowfall, it's still a wonderful sight to behold upon the horizon. Ending the trek across Toronto's Yonge Street, we finally touched the railing, and at last, we've completed the walk, the 16.5 kilometers. Now, after all was said and done, did I prove my point? Yes, Toronto's Yonge Street is in fact walkable. However, if you simply look at the timer, you can see how long it actually took, and you start to see why people don't regularly do this. We have a subway line that runs every 5 minutes both directions along Yonge for a reason, and so it's people like me don't have to spend their entire afternoon walking it. But all in all, I don't regret it. Sure, it was cold and tiring, and albeit pointless in the grand scheme of things, but without it, I wouldn't have seen Toronto in the same way had I stuck to the underground tunnels. I've explored Toronto via transit many times on this channel through different games, but simply walking all the way south from north was something completely different. Seeing how each station's neighborhoods were developing, which shops or stores have closed and opened, and seeing how the city I call home is continuing to grow. And no, Toronto is not quite the walkable city I said it was, even by this stretch of a metric, but walking it once in a while to explore its intricacies might not be such a lofty goal after all.